The stranger bought on Christmas Eve. What he found in the snow changed everything. Before we begin, comment your country so I know where the story is reaching. Harlan Pike arrived in Willow Bend just after the church bell rang its late afternoon notes across the frozen valley. The light had thinned to a pale gold, the kind that settles low along the rooftops and makes the world look like it's waiting for something. Snow moved in loose, drifting sheets as if unsure whether to fall or hold. Harlan rode straight-backed on a dun mare, his breath clouding the air, his coat stiff in the cold and the miles behind him. Willow Bend had changed little in the 9 years he'd been coming and going, the same shopkeeper sweeping snow from his porch, the same old hound curled near the woodpile behind the blacksmith's, the same crooked sign over the mercantile that hadn't hung straight since the day it was nailed up. But on Christmas Eve the town always carried an extra hum beneath its usual calm. Lanterns glowed brighter, voices carried farther. Children tugged at scarves and mittens with restless excitement, hoping the night might bring them something unexpected. Harlan didn't come for celebration. He came for supplies, for winter nails, for lamp oil, for the kind of quiet business a man could finish quickly before heading home. But the sound of gathering voices near the feed hall drew him closer. Not out of curiosity, he rarely indulged in that, but out of habit. He knew the town's rhythms, and something about the murmur felt different, almost unsettled. Inside, the crowd had gathered for the last auction of the year. Cattle, tools, blankets, crates of goods brought in from distant trading posts. Nothing unusual. What startled him was a silence when the final item was brought forward. A woman, small-framed, wrapped in travel-worn layers that looked more suited to a ship's hull than a winter ranch town. She stood with her hands folded carefully, as though afraid to disturb the air around her. Her hair was pinned back with old pins that had tarnished from salt and storm. Her posture held dignity despite everything around her suggesting she had little left to claim. The townsfolk didn't speak loudly, but their whispers moved like threads weaving through the room. She'd been part of a group brought west by an agency that often overpromised and underdelivered. Her name was said to be Maylin. She understood little English, but enough to recognize tone. She kept her gaze steady, not pleading, not hardened, simply present. Harlan hadn't expected to stay long, but something about the way she held herself, quiet, resolute, almost surrendered yet not broken, made him remain where he stood, back near the wall. The auctioneer made his speech. Short, practical. No one wanted to linger with the cold slipping under the door jamb. A few men bid half-heartedly, more out of curiosity than intention. Each time a number was called, Maylin didn't flinch. She seemed to exist in a place deeper inside herself, a place untouched by the opinions or glances of the room. When the bidding slowed, Harlan felt something he couldn't name rise in him. Not pity, not impulse. Something more like recognition, the kind that occurs when two lives carrying old winters catch sight of each other. He raised his hand. The room shifted in quiet surprise. The auctioneer called a number. No one countered. Just like that, the lot was his. Harlan didn't look at the faces turning toward him. He stepped forward, placed the payment on the table, and gestured for Maylin to follow. She gathered a small bundle of belongings at her feet, a scarf, a folded letter, a piece of ribbon that looked older than she was, and walked behind him into the snowy evening. The ride to his homestead was long enough that silence felt natural. Snow thickened into slow white curtains that softened the world until the trees looked like shadows drifting in and out of the fog. Maylin sat with her hands clasped in her lap, her gaze fixed forward, her breathing steady. She did not ask where they were going. She did not tremble. She moved with the calm of someone who had been pushed across too many borders to be startled by another. When they reached the ranch, the world had settled into the quiet that comes before night fully takes hold. Harlan helped her down, opened the door, and let the warmth from the hearth spill into the cold. His home was plain, a single room with a stove, a bed tucked behind a curtain, shelves lined with tools, and a table that had seen years of meals eaten alone. He laid out an extra blanket, poured 2 cups of heated broth, and motioned for her to sit. She whispered a single word of thanks. Soft, almost unsure of itself. He nodded once. Words were not his strength, but steadiness was. Over the next days, she moved through the house like both a guest and a student. She watched the way he prepared the fire, the way he stacked wood, the way he fed the mare in careful, measured scoops. She learned quickly, not through instruction, but through quiet observation. The more she understood the rhythm of the ranch, the less she hesitated. Harlan learned things too. She boiled water not just to clean, but to build warmth. She folded blankets with a care that made old fabric look honorable. She prepared broth with herbs he couldn't identify, yet carried a comfort his winter table had never known. She sang under her breath while washing dishes, soft melodies from a world he'd never see. The townsfolk took notice, some with curiosity, some with skepticism, others with gentle acceptance shaped by the simple truth that winter demands kindness from everyone if anyone is to survive. But the letters changed things. Every few weeks, a thin envelope arrived with a foreign script across its front. She read them outside, where the cold bit at her fingers. She lingered over the words, sometimes smiling softly, sometimes letting her eyes drift toward the empty horizon. Harlan didn't ask. She didn't offer. But something in her grew heavier with each letter, as if the past they carried was tugging at the fragile future she might be building in his house. Still, she stayed. Still, she warmed the place without forcing herself into it. Still, Harlan found himself listening for her footsteps at dawn and her humming at dusk. On the night of Christmas, they walked into town together. Snow crunched under their boots, and lanterns cast halos along the street. Children chased each other through the drifts, while neighbors called out greetings with a gentleness reserved for the holiday. Harlan and Maylin did not hold hands, did not walk close enough for gossip, yet something in their shared silence told the truth more clearly than words could. 2 people who had not expected to belong anywhere had begun to belong somewhere, and neither fully understood how or why. By the time they returned home, the sky had deepened into midnight blue. They stepped onto the porch and watched the soft glow from town shimmer, like a constellation formed just for them. Maylin rested her hand on the lantern beside the door, feeling the warmth seep through the metal. Harlan looked at her, not with longing, not with claim, but with a simple, undeniable certainty. This winter was changing something in both of them. Winter loosened its grip slowly, as if reluctant to release the valley. The days stretched by minutes, then by strands of pale light that clung to the edges of the hills. Harlan noticed a change first in the animals. The horses stamped with less stiffness, the hens began to fuss again, and even the old dog from the neighboring ranch wandered farther from his porch. But inside Harlan's home, the shift felt deeper, settling into moments rather than scenery. Maylin had grown more comfortable moving through the house, though she still stepped lightly, still carried herself as if unsure how much weight she was allowed to place on the world. She woke earlier now, heating the kettle before Harlan's boots hit the floor. She tidied the corners of the room he hadn't bothered with in years. She used her hands like they were meant for mending and calming, shaping the space into something warmer without changing its bones. Harlan didn't tell her, but some mornings he paused before entering the main room just to listen, not to spy, not to intrude, but because the small sounds, the kettle clicking, the soft scrape of a broom, the faint melody she hummed, felt like pieces of a life he'd forgotten how to imagine. Yet the more he noticed, the more he feared what noticing meant. The letters began arriving more frequently. Thin envelopes, slanted handwriting, foreign stamps. Each one carried a weight that tightened something in Maylin's posture. She opened them outside, always facing the ridge, as if expecting the horizon to answer the questions she couldn't speak aloud. Harlan watched from the doorway sometimes, not close enough to intrude, but close enough to know her silence wasn't empty. It was full of memory, worry, and the pieces of the life she'd left behind but not escaped. One morning, she returned with a letter clutched to her chest. She didn't try to hide the tremble in her hands. She simply handed him the envelope. "For you?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "It's yours." "But important." "You read." He opened it carefully. The writing was uneven, translated by someone who didn't know her language well. The message was simple but unsettling. Her cousin, the last family she'd had any contact with, had taken work with a mining crew 3 territories east. Conditions were harsh. Many laborers weren't staying long. The only certainty in the letter was uncertainty itself. She listened as he read, her gaze fixed not on him but on the floor. When he finished, she let out a breath that seemed too heavy for someone her size. "He want me come," she whispered, "but place dangerous. No home, no promise. Do you want to go?" "I don't know." The words sat between them like a winter storm gathering on the horizon. Harlan felt a tightening in his chest he hadn't expected. Not fear, not jealousy, something else. The quiet recognition that he was beginning to care more than he meant to. She didn't speak about the letter again, but over the next days, she moved with a strange mixture of distraction and decision. She cleaned more than usual. She organized shelves that had never needed organizing. She folded blankets twice. She wore an expression he recognized all too well, the expression of someone standing at the edge of 2 futures. Town gossip caught wind of the letter faster than he expected. Folks whispered about whether she'd leave. Some said it was best she'd chase her own people. Others murmured about how Harlan might not hold on to her. Harlan ignored most of it. Maylin, though she never said so, felt every glance. The tension broke one windy afternoon near the end of February. A trader passing through town stopped at the Mercantile to deliver news. The mining settlement where a cousin had been working had suffered a cave-in weeks earlier. Many workers had moved on. Some had vanished into nearby towns looking for safer work. No one knew the cousin's fate. No one even knew if he was still in the territory. The trader spoke casually, unaware of the weight his words carried. Maylin stood frozen at the doorway, the winter sun casting a pale glow along the outline of her coat. Her breath faltered. Her hands tightened around the cloth parcel she carried. The uncertainty she lived with had sharpened into something clearer, something colder. She walked home alone before Harlan could catch up. By the time he arrived, she stood near the barn, her shoulders drawn inward, her eyes fixed on the slushy ground, as though she could read answers in the melting snow. She didn't explain. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him with a weariness that felt older than her years. "He gone?" she asked. "We don't know," Harlan said. "But wherever he is, he's not somewhere safe. And you don't have to chase danger just to feel like you're choosing the right thing." Her gaze lifted, and for the first time, she looked at him without caution, without the thin barrier she'd always kept between them. "But here, I don't want to be trouble." "You're not trouble," he said. "You're company. And that's something I haven't had in a long time." She took in his words as if they were foreign, something unfamiliar yet warming her from the inside. Slowly, she set the parcel down on a bale of hay and stepped closer, her steps hesitant but deliberate. "I don't know what future is," she said softly, "but this place feels like beginning." Harlan didn't move. He didn't reach for her. He simply stood steady, as he always did, letting her choose her distance. In that moment, her choice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't marked by declarations. It was marked by stillness, the kind of stillness where a person lets themselves rest for the first time in a long time. From that night onward, something in the house shifted. She moved with less hesitancy, as though she now believed the floorboards wouldn't break under her feet. She humored Harlan when he explained chores in his gruff, clipped way. She began to laugh, quiet, almost shy, whenever he misunderstood her phrasing and they had to circle back to find the right words. One evening she asked, "Why you stay alone before I come?" "Didn't plan it. Just happened." She nodded as though she understood the shape of loneliness better than most. He asked her, "If your cousin wrote again, would you go?" She took a long moment before answering. "I think maybe I go if heart tells me go. But heart, not here or there yet. It learning." He didn't press further. He simply accepted that truth the same way he accepted weather. Then came the early March thaw, the kind that turns a world soft and unpredictable. Ruts deepened on the trail. Streams rushed with sudden life. A single morning of sunlight could undo a whole week of winter's work. The thaw didn't just change the land. It changed the rhythm between them. One morning, Harlan found her sitting on the porch, watching the snowmelt carve thin lines through the dirt. She looked at peace, almost hopeful. She motioned for him to sit beside her. When he did, she pointed toward the valley, where the river shimmered like it had just awakened. "In my home," she said, "we say river shows future. Not direct, but give feeling. And what does it show you today?" She smiled slightly. "Maybe stay. Maybe build something." He didn't respond, but the slightest breath he released gave his answer away. They sat together without touching, without deciding anything final, but no longer strangers bound by circumstance. They sat like two people slowly learning to build a shared world out of the quietest foundations. And that was when the true test began, not from danger, not from outsiders, but from the past that neither of them had fully faced. If you're still here, make sure to like and subscribe so more folks can find these stories. Spring arrived quietly in Willow Bend, not with bright fanfare, but with slow unbuttoning of winter's grip. The ground softened. The river loosened its voice. The trees began showing the faintest hint of green, like someone whispering color into the world. For most folks, this season meant relief. For Harlan and Maylin, it meant something deeper. The past finally catching up, not in the shape of danger, but in the form of choices that could no longer be paused. At first, it seemed like the world was giving them space. The thaw brought chores that required both their hands. Fences sagged under months of snow and needed reinforcement. The chickens returned to their normal fussing. Harlan worked with steady patience, and Maylin moved with quiet determination. She learned how to lift boards without splitting them. She learned when to let Harlan take the heavier end and when to insist on doing her own part. He admired her stubbornness, though he never said so. She admired his steadiness, though she rarely found the words to express it. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost like partnership. Not romantic, not declared, but built out of small consistency. Shared meals, shared work, shared silence. Sometimes you would catch him watching her as she kneaded dough or hung laundry outside. Not with hunger, not with expectation, just with a kind of searching calm, as if he were trying to understand how someone he barely knew had become part of the quiet he now depended on. But letters always come back when life begins to steady. One arrived in mid-March, different handwriting, firmer ink. The envelope looked traveled, worn at the corners, as if it crossed more than distance to find her. Maylin took it to the porch and sat on the step with the letter in her lap, staring at the seal without breaking it. Harlan saw her from the window. He felt a small ache in his ribs he didn't want to name. When she finally opened it, she read slowly, her brow tightening with each line. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. But when she stood and walked inside, she moved like someone whose body remembered grief before the mind fully understood it. She placed the letter on the table in front of Harlan. "My cousin," she said softly. "Someone see him, but not good." He unfolded the paper carefully. The news was vague. A man matching the cousin's description had been spotted in a distant railroad camp, injured, working odd jobs until he could move on. The details were scattered, unreliable, but the implication was clear. He was alive, restless, and drifting. Maylin pressed her hands together. He'd go place to place. No home, no safe. I think he want me find him. Her voice wasn't hopeful. It was burdened. Harlan folded the letter back into her hands. Or, he doesn't want you chasing trouble. Sometimes people move because they don't want family carrying their weight. She lowered her gaze. But he is last of family. That doesn't mean you owe him your life. She looked at him then, fully, directly, without her usual reserve. But you give me place. I not want to leave, but I not want to choose wrong. He didn't look away. You're allowed to choose for yourself. That's not wrong. She turned her head, blinking hard as if the sunlight stung her eyes. I don't know future. Only here feels like I can breathe. That truth hung between them, warm and heavy. But the world doesn't pause just because two people need time. A week later, word spread through town that a wagon train heading east needed hands. Someone mentioned it to Maylin while she was purchasing flour. They meant it kindly, an opportunity, a chance for her to find the cousin she had been searching for. But kindness can sometimes feel like pressure. She returned home shaken, speaking little. That night, she sat at the table longer than usual, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Harlan worked on mending gear, but every now and then he watched her quietly, knowing she was fighting a battle he couldn't wage for her. Finally, she spoke. If I go, and he not there, then I lose both places. If you stay, Harlan asked, do you lose anything? Yes, she whispered. Lose chance to do right. But I don't want to lose this. The last word came out trembling. This, the house, the quiet, the steady way he talked to her, the way she had begun to hum again, the way she had begun to feel like a person rather than someone carried by circumstance. Harlan set aside his work and looked at her plainly. You're not bound here. You stay because you want to, and that means more than any obligation. She breathed out slowly. You want me stay? He didn't hide it. Yes. Her eyes softened in a way he had never seen. Not romantic, not dramatic, just profoundly relieved. And yet, relief alone didn't decide futures. The days that followed were quieter. She moved through the house as if memorizing it. Harlan worked with more intensity than usual, as if the land needed extra tending. Neither said the words out loud, but both felt the unspoken truth tightening. She needed to make a final decision, and her hesitation was its own kind of storm. Then the turning point came from a place neither of them expected. The town planned a small spring gathering, a tradition meant to welcome the new season and mark the end of winter hardships. Harlan rarely attended, but Maylin asked if he would go with her. He agreed without hesitation. The gathering took place in a clearing where the sun felt warmer, where logs were arranged in a circle and neighbors shared simple food. Children played near the edge of the trees. Couples leaned close, speaking in low voices. It was a gentle kind of celebration. Maylin stood near Harlan, listening to a woman tell her about sewing patterns. The woman spoke slowly but kindly, helping Maylin find words to respond. For the first time, Maylin seemed not like an outsider, but like a newcomer being welcomed. Then a young girl approached her with a small handmade ribbon. For you, the girl said shyly. Maylin accepted it with both hands, bowed her head in gratitude. The child giggled and ran back to her mother. Harlan watched the moment. The warmth, the quiet connection, the way Maylin tucked the ribbon into her sleeve as if it were a treasure, and something inside him shifted with absolute certainty. She belonged here, not because he wanted her, but because she was beginning to root herself naturally into the fabric of the place. On the walk home, she held the ribbon like a fragile hope. "I feel safe," she said softly. First time in very long time. Harlan stopped walking. She stopped too, looking up at him with the first true openness he'd ever seen in her. "You don't have to leave to honor the past," he told her. "You can build something new that doesn't erase what came before." Her breath trembled. "But if cousin find me, then he finds you stronger than before." They stood in the fading light, the world soft around them, neither rushing to silence. Finally she asked the only question that mattered. "If I stay, you won't build life with me?" Not a romantic confession, not a dramatic leap. A question shaped by survival and hope braided together. Harlan didn't hesitate. "Yes, if that's what you want too." Her answer wasn't in words. It was in the way she stepped closer, the way she let the ribbon fall into her palm like a promise settling into place. From that evening on, she didn't look toward the east anymore. She looked toward spring. She didn't wake with fear of obligation. She woke with direction. And Harlan Pike, a man who never thought life would move toward warmth again, felt the beginning of something steady and real, something that grew not from dramatic rescue, but from two quiet lives learning to share the same ground. By Easter, they had moved her belongings to the drawer beside his bed. By summer, the town spoke of them as a pair. By the following Christmas, the 1-year mark of the auction where everything had begun, they returned to town side by side, not out of necessity, but out of belonging. Two strangers bought by circumstance had become a home by choice.